Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, February 1st. Prior to calling the meeting to order, I would like to ask members who are calling in by phone to please identify themselves. Okay. I'd like to now call the Regional Council meeting to order and ask Larry McCallum to lead us in the pledge.
Please join me as we salute the flag that represents our republic. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, do we have a quorum?
Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. We are holding this meeting in compliance with the Brown Act rules related to telephonic and video conference meetings. SCAG offices are open to members of the public to attend and participate in person. Instructions for providing public comment are provided in advance and also included in the agenda packet. Just as a reminder to reduce background noise, please ensure that your microphone is muted when not in use. I will now open the public comment period of the meeting. This is time for members of the public to comment on matters that are within SCAG's jurisdiction but are not listed on the agenda. Staff have received any written public comments after the deadline of 5 p.m. Wednesday, January 31st, 2024.
Good morning, Mr. President. We did receive one written comment after the deadline. The comments we received prior to the deadline have been provided to the members of the RC. The remaining one will be in the minutes.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak? No.
There's one raised hand by Helen Higgins.
Go ahead.
I apologize. I raised my hand too quickly. It's for agenda 2 item that I want to speak on. I apologize.
No problem. Okay, well, I will now close the public comment period for matters not listed on the agenda. Is there any need to review and prioritize agenda items? Rid of the consent calendar now. Okay, I'll wait then. Yeah. Okay. Seeing none. Our first item is an information item. Number 1, Governor's Budget Update, Regional Early Planning Grant, REAP 2020, REAP 2.0. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on item 1?
I don't see any raised hands, Mr. Chair.
I'll call on.
Oh, there is one now.
There is one now.
First District. Appears it'll be Supervisor Hilda Solis.
First District, you're muted.
Yes,
there you go.
Yes, hi, good morning. I'm sorry. I wanted to wait for the presentation and then speak on this item. So I'm sorry, I hit it too fast, perhaps.
Yes.
Hear the presentation and then I will speak after. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll call on Darren Chitsey to do the presentation.
Good afternoon, Regional Council members. Darren Chitsey, Chief Operating Officer at SCAG. Kome is out sick today, so I will be sitting in for him. As those of you that I'm sure follow this, the state budget has certainly had some challenges. Revenue predictions are below what many have expected and hoped for. On January 10th, the governor unveiled his proposed budget for the next year. And to meet those reductions in expected revenue, there was a series of cuts that were proposed. Those series of cuts were wide-ranging amongst a lot of different program areas that are of interest to SCAG, and I'm sure many of your jurisdictions as well. However, I wanted to update you on a particular item, the Regional Early Action Plan 2.0 grant program that was funds that come to SCAG directly. Over the time that SCAG's been around, we certainly have shown the importance of the work that we do around transportation. But one of the things that had always been missing is certainly funds to really help think about how we can plan and how we can support housing planning production throughout the region. Several years ago, the state, in a first of its time, made those commitments in the REAP program that allowed SCAG for the first time to really start to develop a housing program and provide technical assistance to our cities, as well as granting opportunities throughout the region to think about how cities and counties can bring online housing production. We know that's such a critical issue for the state right now, and there's so many forces that are working to help turn that around. And these grants were certainly an important piece of that. Unfortunately, the governor's budget is proposing about $1.2 billion in cuts to the housing program overall. $300 million of those cuts are particularly in the REAP program. In essence, what that does, it's proposing to cut that program in half. SCAG has received those monies over a year ago now, and we've been diligently working to identify programs and projects to do exactly what the governor's goal was, is to increase housing production throughout the region. We've been able to develop a program, an extremely comprehensive program that we're very proud of what we've been able to put together in a very short amount of time, and have actually awarded 118 grants throughout the region using those resources. Unfortunately, the situation that we find ourselves in today is it provides some uncertainty in the REAP program over the next several months as the budget moves its way through the legislative process. SCAG, and I know we spoke to all the policy committees earlier in the day, is putting together a very strong advocacy effort, understanding that the legislature, as well as the governor, has made a strong commitment to housing. And while we understand there are limitations in this year's budget, we don't think this would be the appropriate time to cut funds from such a critical program. But while we continue those advocacy efforts over the next several months, and we hope to engage all of you in those efforts, we also must make some tough decisions about how we manage the funds that we have today. We understand from HCD that if the governor's budget proposal does move forward, they would in essence cut the program in half, meaning that SCAG's allocation would drop to about $118 million. While that's a significant amount of money, and that would be one of the largest programs SCAG has ever carried forward, unfortunately, the program as it's designed today is not really designed to be cut in half. As you can imagine, with the type of projects that we've been able to bring interest from in 118, that would certainly dilute the resources and perhaps not have the impact that the state is really looking for with these resources. That's not to say we might not consider that at a later time, but given that uncertainty, we just don't think that's the appropriate step forward. So given this uncertainty, we have had to pause SCAG sub-allocation programs throughout this. There are certain projects that have already entered in a memorandum of understanding, particularly with our county transportation commissions. Over the last week or so, our staff has been diligently reaching out to each one of those agencies and issuing a stop order on those works, or if we haven't officially entered into a contract with the grantee, letting them know that there will be a delay before we move forward. We understand this is a great uncertainty because if projects made it through this process and were selected, they are critical and they have an important value to the region and to their community. But we did find this was in the best interest while we're waiting to see how the governor's budget plays out, to see how we might have to revamp and recreate the program to ensure that we're providing this critical. So more to come on our advocacy efforts. You can read in the agenda packet on page 10 a little more specifics about the actions that SCAG is taking during this time of uncertainty. We will also be posting a toolkit of advocacy resources about how you can engage your legislative offices, again, with 118 projects already selected. And unfortunately, all of them being put at risk now, we do think Southern California is in a strong position to make a case how these resources should be ones that should be restored as the budget moves through the legislative process. So I will stop there and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I'll entertain comments from members of the RC. As a reminder, if a member of the body is attending remotely but is not at the location specified on the agenda, they may observe but not participate in any discussion or voting of this body. I'll now go to Supervisor Solis, who had the fastest hand in the West.
Oh, boy, I don't know about that, but listen, I want to thank the staff for this presentation. I think a lot of steps that you all have been taking, knowing that these cuts are pending, are commendable. And I certainly will do my part on the Board of Supervisors as well to see if we can collectively get our board also to send a letter to the governor's office. But I just wanted to underscore that the funding that the REAP 2.0 funding provides is really essential, especially when we're talking about the priorities of the governor as well as some of the Board of Supervisors here in LA County, I'm sure around the Southern California region regarding housing and homelessness. I think those are really big ticket items. But more importantly, even in our own first district that I represent, we're also looking at a potential loss of $5 million to the San Gabriel Valley Regional Housing Trust Funds, which has helped us incentivize our small cities who can't undertake a lot of these developments for interim and permanent housing. And this certainly would strike a major blow here to the San Gabriel Valley, which overlaps 3 of the supervisorial districts, the 5th and the 4th, as well as mine. I just want to urge our staff, if you could please take a look at what other funding might be made available. And I want to point out specifically to the staff, if we can have a developed plan to identify potential alternative fundings to help restart the contracting and funding of the projects that you've already kind of mentioned that were underway. And the areas that I want to point out are the recent changes, for your information, on the federal formula allocations for the Surface Transportation Block Grant, known as STBG, and the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement, CMAX, and the State Carbon Reduction Program, CRP. SCAG, in my opinion, should prioritize using those funds to backfill the REAP 2.0 funded programs. I don't think we should wait 5 or 6 months while the legislature or governor negotiate the budget, but we should be looking at how we can reduce and eliminate any risk to any of these particular projects that we know are going to have a tremendous impact in our region. So I just wanted to underscore that and make those comments to the board.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. We certainly are exploring all options where these projects might be funded via other sources. And I think the ones you mentioned are a good idea. That is traditionally transportation funding. So finding that balance and that nexus with these projects and how we could, if we get to that situation where we're not able to restore those funds, find other ways to fund these critical projects is certainly a high priority of ours. I appreciate you raising that.
Thank you so much. And my staff stands ready, and we'll work with Metro as well, whatever's needed. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Rocky Rhodes and Margaret Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Something was brought up in the CEHD meeting today as a suggestion, as we all are going to be writing our individual letters, but to have a single letter signed by all the regional council I know that your letter would represent us, but having actual signatures on that letter individually, that makes for a very short letter with a lot of signatures. And I think that would have a great impact.
Margaret?
Yes, I totally agree with Supervisor Solis. She's my supervisor. And I'm just blown away that they have been pushing for housing and homelessness for years and trying to take away our local control of this. And then they're going to take away the funding that we have. Our housing trust that Susan Rubio put through is so important. And to have that taken away when it's just mind boggling. So thank you, Supervisor.
Your lips to God's ears, sweetie.
City of Mission Viejo.
Sorry for that comment a little bit, sorry, but I appreciate what my colleagues have said. I forgot I was unmuted. Sorry. This is Wendy Bucknam with City Mission Viejo. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. So everybody has actually already mentioned something that the 2 things I was going to mention. I support getting a letter out, great, and that was brought up in our committee meeting earlier, and the housing comment is right on. And then I appreciate the supervisor's comments so very much and am in alignment with those. But just one additional question is, could you share with the regional council kind of what the short-term plans are for implementation on staffing assignments? And what is the full extent of SCAG's reduction in that regard of our team members because of this funding reduction? If you could share that, please. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. As mentioned, we certainly are pausing all of the sub-regional allocation programs. There still is some work that needs to be done in finalizing, and we do have staff on board that will continue to charge some time to the REAP program. Overall, that number is about 20 full-time equivalents. Most of those are limited term. Only about 2.5 full-time equivalents are regular staff. We do have several vacancies at the time right now at SCAG. One of the things we are also doing is taking an extra review of those vacancies and shifting assignments of staff that have been working on REAP programs to other ongoing funding sources or projects that need additional assistance to help fill in the gaps. So we are doing our best to minimize any expenditure of the REAP 2 resources while we await final program allocation numbers.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Supervisor Spiegel.
To go along with my fellow supervisor of LA, I like the ideas of us trying to find other sources. I think it's critical to have that plan, which is what Wendy just talked about. We need to have the plan. What if it doesn't get reinstated? And all the entities, if everybody's on pause, I know how difficult that is to be gearing up and suddenly on pause. We should start looking now, if it is cut in half, what projects and what's the criteria, how we're going to mitigate this loss, because it's going to be a challenge. And talk about catfights. It's going to be, and we should get a process, a policy. How are we going to mitigate this and wait till September 30th? We need to have a process to start the forethought so that those entities that may get cut will have an opportunity to work even harder with CMAQ or any of the other funding sources, depending on what their project was. Because it's critical to suddenly, wait till September 30th, hoping you're going to be one of those, and then suddenly said no, and then you're left with some plans that aren't utilized. And it's critical that we work through this the entire time. And then, of course, all hoping that we're going to get the full funding.
Can I respond? Can I just add a comment, Supervisor?
Yes.
Thank you, Supervisor. Very well put. Our first goal is to get the funding restored. And so we certainly are very much focused on that. But understanding where the state budget is at and realistically knowing there's a lot of other competing interests that are going to be in the same situation as we are, as asking for their funds to be fully restored. We are absolutely preparing some options and some thoughts that we'll come back to the regional council to get some feedback and discussion and direction on. I'm not sure if that'll be next month, if the month after, but we're certainly working to get back to you very quickly on some possible options.
Any others? That's it. Okay, we'll go on to first action item number 2, recommended data standards for SoCal green print. Do we have any members of the public to wish to speak on item 2?
We have one card from Pam O'Connor, and I believe somebody had already indicated their desire to speak as well.
Yes.
Oh, the green button. Oh, the green button. Aha, the green print. So, so it's no surprise that I'm here for the green print. And I'm here to urge you to support the staff recommendation to adopt the green print. As a SCAG Regional Council member for 20 years, I've seen SCAG function as a convener, providing a platform for robust process when developing plans and initiatives. The green print, for example, the green print, you convened a technical advisory committee almost a year ago. And there would be ample time for discussion with stakeholders and interested parties in order to build common ground. The success of the process resulted in a recommendation from your Energy and Environment Committee to adopt the green print. So I urge you to adopt the green print today. A job well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Online.
The next speaker was online.
We have several raised hands online. The first one is the BISSC.
Yes, and good afternoon. Carlos Rodriguez, Chief Policy Officer with the Building Industry Association of Southern California. I'd like to express our appreciation to the SCAG Regional Council and staff for your prior action to establish the Green Print Attack, which provided a transparent and collaborative process to discuss issues of concern. Thank you to each of the GTAC members for their time and dedication to this significant effort. We support the recommended action in the staff report. In particular, we agree with the GTAC recommendation that the green print feature a disclaimer and a pop-up screen, which will prevent the data employed in the green print from being weaponized under CEQA and similar statutory and regulatory processes. Likewise, we believe clarifying the data selection standard A4 will help ensure a prudent approach concerning the use of data for the green print tool. Addressing these concerns will help ensure the green print the construction of new home communities and widen the housing income inequality gap. As noted in a report by the Public Policy Institute of California, the housing crisis in California affects residents of all races and ethnicities, but the lack of affordable housing is particularly acute for African Americans and Latinos. Skyrocketing rents in many California metro areas impose growing financial burdens, limiting opportunities for savings. For example, the Latino home ownership rates stood at 44% or 19 points below that of white households. The Black home ownership rate was even more worrisome at 37% or roughly 26 points below the rate of white households. Because home equity makes up the majority of wealth for low and middle income families, gaps in home ownership rates magnify wealth inequality. As housing prices continue to rise quickly in the aftermath of the pandemic, there is concern that these inequities may grow, leaving many, especially younger, lower income and non-white Californians without the meaningful opportunity to own a home. The BIA Southern California remains committed to working with the Regional Council and every member city to address the chronic housing shortage in the SCAG region. We look forward to working with you to ensure we also address the critical transportation and infrastructure priorities needs for our growing population. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, next speaker, Helen Higgins.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Helen Higgins, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Friends of Coyote Hills, located in Fullerton. I wish to support the green print as presented in the staff recommendation. I certainly applaud the collaboration that took place across the business and environmental communities throughout the green print, through the Green Print Technical Advisory Committee. As elected leaders, this is the time to make good on our promises. Let's release the tool without further delay and make sure our planners have access to the data that they need for smart land use. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Mr. President, is Claire Schlotterbeck.
Thank you. I'm Executive Director of Hills for Everyone, the nonprofit that established Chino Hills State Park and is working to save the Puente Chino Hills Wildlife Corridor at the juncture of Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties. I'm here to support the green print as presented by staff. It was good to be in this process and see everyone working across priorities to find common ground in the green print's policies and data standards. I also appreciate the Energy and Environment Committee for reviewing these standards and providing their unanimous approval. We look forward to the day that the Green Print is launched and our region has access to this much-needed planning tool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Elizabeth Wallace.
Hello, my name's Elizabeth Wallace, and I'm the president of the California Native Plant Society Orange County chapter. Our focus is to protect California's native plants and their habitats. And this focus aligns with the Green Print, which will support quality of life, clean air, safe housing, and recreation. We support this planning tool as presented by staff and look forward to its launch later this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Chris Wilson, BizFed.
Good afternoon, Regional Council members. My name is Chris Wilson. I serve as the Senior Advocacy Manager for the Los Angeles County Business Federation. You know it as BizFed. I'll be quick. I just want to express our strong support for the recommendation action before you to support the Green Print. Members, we've come a long way to where we are today, and for that, I want to thank staff, the TAC members of the Energy and Environment Committee, and of course, the Regional Council for their continuous and robust conversations over the last couple of years. So thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Next, Jack Ide.
Thank you. Yes, Jack Ide. I'm co-founder of the SoCal 350 Climate Action Group. We represent 10,000 people across Southern California. I'm based out of Los Angeles. Want to express my appreciation for all the effort to develop the data involved in the SoCal Green Print and all of the effort of collaboration through the Technical Advisory Committee and all the hearings. It's been quite an effort, and we're glad that everyone has been participating and that we've known about it and been able to speak out. And we want to express support of the effort, the Green Print as it's been put forward by staff, and looking forward to putting it to use out in the world. Thank you very much.
Next, Nairi Bagdasarian.
Hi, my name is Nairi Bag.
Ms. Badgezarian, you've gone mute.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. You. I'm the Director of Public Policy for the San Gabriel Valley Economic Partnership. Coming to support the Green Print, and also wanted to echo everyone's appreciation for the staff, the SCAG team, to really putting in the extra effort and making sure that everyone's voices were heard and everyone was able to collaborate and agree on how to move forward on this. So really appreciate all the effort put into it. Thank you.
Next, Gloria Sefton.
Good afternoon. Yes, it is afternoon. To the council, thank you. My name is Gloria Sefton. I am a board member of Friends of Harbors, Beaches, and Parks, and wanted to express our support again for the Green Print as presented by SCAG staff and their recommendation. The Regional Council directed SCAG staff to form a technical advisory committee in February 23 when it approved the Regional Advanced Mitigation Planning Framework. That process allowed additional concerns and feedback to be discussed. We are very supportive. Let's make the Green Print available for SCAG's members and the public without further delay. Thank you very, very much.
Next, Roxy Rivas.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Roxy, the Planning Director at Pacoima Beautiful. I'm here to voice our strong support for the Green Print as presented by staff. First off, a big shout out to everyone involved and their hard work in building common ground with the Green Print's policies and the data standards. It's truly fantastic to see collaboration across various priorities. I want to express our gratitude to the Energy and Environment Committee for their thoughtful review on the process standards and the recommendations. Their dedication is ensuring the green print aligns with the highest standards, which are vital for its success. As someone deeply involved in planning in Pacoima and other parts of the valley, I'm genuinely excited about the day the Green Print is officially launched. This planning tool is a game changer for all of us, and the collaborative effort put into it is very impressive. It's not just a tool for us, it's a step towards a more sustainable and resilient community. Thank you all.
Richard Lambros.
Good afternoon, Regional Council members. Rich Lambros, Managing Director of the Southern California Leadership Council. On behalf of our organization and our coalition partners, we want to express our support for the Green Print proposal before you today. As you all know very well, this is the end of a long road on Green Print. Certainly started out a few years back as a point of contention between a lot of stakeholders and some of our leaders there at SCAG. To your credit, you took the time to reset the process, ask us all to start over and get it right. And along the way, I know it's been a couple of years, but along the way, we adopted a regional advanced mitigation program last year, thanks to that process. And now this year, coming back with a much improved Green Print proposal for you. So really appreciative of SCAG, really appreciative of our fellow stakeholders who took the time, and everyone has really put a lot of time into this, since it tends to be a somewhat technical issue, and probably a good example of SCAG being a real regional leader in facilitating a robust, broad stakeholder discussion that leads to a really solid outcome. So we're really appreciative of this. We're appreciative of the regional council members, especially our SCAG leaders and especially our SCAG staff. So thank you, we support, and we hope you'll vote to approve today. Thank you.
Dan Silver.
Good afternoon, Chair, Council members, Dan Silver, Endangered Habitats League in Los Angeles. We are in support of this collaborative outcome. Thank you.
And last, Melanie Schlotterbeck.
Good afternoon, Regional Council. My name is Melanie Schlotterbeck, and I'm representing the dozens of community-based equity, nonprofit, and social justice groups, and even some housing and infill nonprofits that have supported the Green Print in the past and now. We have come a long way, as you've heard from others, and appreciate the hard work from staff, elected officials, the Green Print TAC, the Energy and Environment Committee, the business community, and the environmental community. And I want you to know the environmental community does support what is presented to you today as agenda item 2, and we enthusiastically urge your support of the Green Print data standards and data disclaimer language as recommended by the EEC. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Any other? That's it. Okay, I'll now call on Ryan Wolf, Sustainable and Resilient Development Manager, to present the item.
Good afternoon, members of the Regional Council. Ryan Wolf. On behalf of SCAG staff and with appreciation for all of the different stakeholders who participate in the GTAC process, we're excited to be here and to review the recommended action today and answer any questions. So here's the recommended action we're looking at today. We're recommending adopting the data standards and incorporating them into the SCAG Regional Advanced Mitigation Policy Framework. And in terms of the agenda for this presentation, we'll do a quick overview of the SoCal Green Print and RAMP. Our consultant here today is Arup, and they will go over also a quick review of the Green Print data standards, and then we'll revisit the recommended action once again. So as a quick refresher, what the SoCal Green Print is, for all of you who may not be familiar, it's a tool of publicly available data that will help agencies and other stakeholders make land use and transportation decisions, and also conserve natural and farmlands. And then it aligns with the objectives of regional advanced mitigation planning efforts. And for those who may not be as familiar with RAMP, RAMP is really a tool and a process for expediting project delivery. It allows stakeholders early in the project process to identify opportunities to offset the impacts of projects and really streamline and expedite those projects effectively. SCAG has its own RAMP initiative, as was noted in the comments, and that effort is really to help establish, supplement, or complement the regional conservation and mitigation banks and similar approaches. It is an entirely voluntary effort, And of course, it was put forth by the SoCal 2020 PR mitigation measures. The ramp policy framework directed SCAG back in early 2023 to establish the GTAC. And the GTAC, the process for this was to bring together a variety of stakeholders from throughout the region to go ahead and discuss the data standards. Here they're listed as policies, parameters, and criteria, but for simplification, we've been calling them data standards, and to go ahead and advance forward a shared vision for them. In terms of this advisory committee, it was made up of elected officials from throughout the region, staff from various agencies, as well as environmental and business stakeholders. And once again, we'd just like to really express appreciation for all of them who participated in there. What you see in front of you is really the inputs of all of those various stakeholders. It was incredibly helpful discussion, and their time is much appreciated. So this GTAC really built on the ramp policy framework recommendations. These are mirrored very much in the recommended data standards you see before you today. Data must be publicly available. There needs to be a strong partnership with government agencies. It's for informational purposes only. Those are critical components of this. And then really quickly, we had 3 GTAC meetings. We also conducted focus groups. These went from summer through fall. We got some key information and key feedback from these. In the first meeting, just to note that we discussed the ramp ATG recommendations so that members could provide their feedback on those so we could understand how they felt about those and then move those forward. Those inform the data recommendations. We also received a presentation from Caltrans for the Regional Event Mitigation Needs Assessment. As a result of that presentation, we got feedback from GTAC members that this would be an opportunity to look at their efforts as a model, do a start small approach that incorporated a lot of these trusted data layers, and then move those forward into the green print itself. We utilized all that information, went into the second meeting and introduced a set of draft data standards, had more discussion, and then came back in the third meeting with revisions to that, as well as discussing options for tool functionality. And as well, we wanted to utilize those draft data standards and evaluate a set of data layers to both understand ourselves and to illuminate for the GTAC members and other stakeholders how those would actually work in practice. I am going to hand the presentation over to our consultant, Jörg Tondorf, and he'll get into some of the more specifics of this.
Right, yeah, that's done. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, Jörg Tondorf from Arab. So I'm going to be giving you an overview of the recommended data standards for the so-called green print. So these standards were developed over the course of the last 6 months, building on the work that was previously done by the ramp policy framework, and then really, as emphasized in a lot of the statements, through a collaborative effort between SCAG staff, us as a consultancy team, and particularly input from the TAC to really get to the draft standards that we present today. These standards are a critical element of the green print because they define the specification and application of the web-based tool that everybody's looking forward to actually using. Specifically, they address the credibility, the quality, and the purpose of the tool. So the key objectives of the data standards are to ensure alignment with the ramp policy framework, to build on the ramp ATG recommendations and the GTAC feedback. They should ensure, or the standards should ensure, that Greenprint meets or where possible actually surpasses other relevant web mapping application standards. And we want to establish a consistent and transparent approach to data, evaluation, selection, and updates. And it's a key objective to clearly communicate the purpose of the Greenprint data and also its limitations. Proposed data standards have been grouped into a couple of topic areas. As you can see on the slide, these standards relate to how data is being evaluated for actually incorporation in the tool, how data is communicated and the purpose of the data and the tool is demonstrated, how the tool can be accessed, considering it is a web-based application. There are data standards that cover the process for maintaining and updating the data. And then we have data standards that address how the data is presented within the tool. The first set of data standards provides guidance on how data is evaluated. This includes the requirement that data must be publicly available, will be final and unaltered, and created, sponsored, or used by agencies. Data also needs to be regionally comprehensive, with any gaps that might exist clearly identified and explained.
Just wanted to note one thing that we, under standard A4 in the staff packet on page 19, the language is listed correctly. In the presentation that went out with the packet, as well as attachment A, there was a slight deviation in terms of those language. So just wanted to go ahead and this slide reflects the correct language with the cross out compared to what was in the staff packet. And just wanted to note that here that we will make that correction.
Right, thanks, Ryan. So moving on, the recommended standards A7 to A8 communicates the purpose of the data. It was a particular focus of the GTAC to define how to communicate the purpose of the data as being for informational purposes only. Data should not be seen as an expression of regional policy. And where standards A7 to A8 communicate the informational purposes, standards B1 and B2 then describe how the purpose of the data will be communicated within the actual Greenprint tool and how users will be informed about the standard and the purpose of the data. So if a user enters the tool, as you can see here as a mock-up on the right-hand side, they will have to acknowledge the purpose of the data and its limitations. It will be communicated through a disclaimer statement. The proposed disclaimer language was informed by tag input and is included in the staff report. Users will have to acknowledge the same limitations again if they want to export data from the Greenprint. Standard C1 directs the Greenprint to be web-based and easily accessible, given that this is a tool that should be available to the public. And then standards D1 to D5 define the process for maintaining the data and updating any data, and also how it is organized. All data within the tool will need to be evaluated using these data standards. The utility of data layers for supporting land use and transportation decision-making will also be a key component of evaluating whether layers want inclusion in the Greenprint. You can see on the right, the graph, data will be organized in 7 thematic areas. These are aligned with feedback from county transportation commissions and local planning needs. And it's in support of RAMP as well. You can also see on the graph how the layers currently are distributed across these thematic areas. That is the format that we intend to launch later this year. Obviously, in the future, when there's a revision to data, that distribution of layers across the areas could change. The Greenprint tool will include a data update process for any data revision or adding new data. The purpose will include a review of data layers under consideration to ensure they abide by the adopted data standards, and then be advanced to the Energy and Environment Committee for review. Data standards E1 and E2 refer to how data is presented within the Greenprint. They define the need for a glossary and a method section that clearly defines where the data comes from and provide full transparencies to user about various other elements, technical elements about the data source, about the data it was created, potential links to other web addresses, and methodologies, how the data was prepared, and so on. In addition, and consistent with SCAG's data policy, layers will include so-called metadata, which is consistent with the geospatial metadata standards and guidelines established by the Federal Geographic Data Committee. The screenshot at the bottom simply represents an example of how metadata can be presented within the Greenprint. With that, I hand it back to Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we're back to the recommended action. We'll turn it back over for discussion. And if there's any questions, we are obviously here to answer them.
Thank you. I just, for those new, this started almost 3 years ago under Clint Lorimore. And when we first brought this up, it was like the biggest war I ever seen. It's like half of McCoy's, half and half, 50-50. It was a mess. And I had the opportunity to be appointed on the, I guess what you call it, the subcommittee after that, to take back and take a look at it. And then on the TAC committee as well to come up with these standards. And I just want to give my hats off to the staff, all the participants, to the leadership here to get all those people we just heard on both sides from both extremes to come up and support this as is should let us know we can do policy across borders, across lines, and come up with a good policy as SCAG. So congratulations to the team, to the consultants, to the staff that got us all together in one thing. With that, I'm very happy to close the chapter on this. Hopefully it gets out today because I never want to hear green print again after 3 years. But I'll be happy to move it whenever the appropriate time is, Mr. President.
Larry McCallum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree totally with what Supervisor Hagman said. I just wanted to say that, this is one of the major goals or purposes for SCAG as a convener of stakeholders to collaborate on issues that affect the region. And it's a good example of what we can achieve when we talk to each other rather than talking past each other. And with that, I would suggest we take this item along with the consent calendar, and I will second whatever motion is made by Supervisor Hagman.
With the consent, yes. Thank you.
Supervisor Spiegel.
Yes, to take Supervisor Hagman's comments a little further, it was quite an interesting time when there was such divisive in here. And I think we should learn from that, and that times we make policy recommendations that we do open up and transparently bring this forward. It was kind of thrown, and I heard about from all those protesting like the day before, or the day of. There wasn't much time that we gave any conversation. I'm hoping that anything that's a large item that we're going to recommend for policy, that we should begin with transparency, begin including our partners in discussion so that we don't take 3 years to get something done. Be much more expedient. We proved that we could do it, so I'm excited. I'll third the item.
May I ask, this is through item number 9, isn't it?
Correct.
Thank you.
Meister.
Thank you very much. Ryan, I just wanted to confirm, so A4 is what EEC approved at the meeting, because you went back to that so quickly.
Yes, that's correct. It's what's listed in page 19 of the staff report.
Great, thank you. And then if I could just make a comment that, well, I think the disclaimer seems a little bit on the side of overkill. I strongly support SCAG's development of the SoCal Green Print. We have to remember that nature is also critical infrastructure, and extreme heat and pollution and disappearing tree canopy and green space also hits our lower income communities hardest. And so just as there must be housing equity, there must also be climate equity. I want to thank the efforts of GTAC and staff, and I'm proud to be a member of the Energy and Environment Committee, which was unanimous in its support of this item. The SoCal Green Print will promote transparency and informed decision-making and will be a valuable tool for local jurisdictions. So thank you.
Mr. President, if I could interrupt here just to Member Meister's point, with your permission, I'd like to read into the record the corrected language on standard A4 as approved by the EEC on January 4th, just so everyone's clear on what the actual language you're voting on today is. And that is, data input shall be created, sponsored, or used by regulatory agencies, state and or federal agencies.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Remote locations wish to speak.
We have
Frank Navarro.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the Regional Council. As Supervisor Hagman said, it's been a long time coming. I've always been in support of Green Print project, and I'm glad to see it come to fruition. And it's an excellent tool for the collaboration, the transparency, and the working together of our region. We can't work it alone. We have to work it together. Thank you very much, staff.
Thank you. Everybody will raise hands? No. Okay,
So with that, I believe we have a motion to combine the consent calendar with item 2 by Supervisor Hagman, second by Mr. McCallum.
oh, yes.
And if we can just ask if there's any public
Any
comment.
public speakers on item 2 or the consent calendar?
Don't see any, Mr.
Don't see
Mr.
any.
President.
Don't see.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Ashley Aiken,
Yes.
Damien Alexander, Valeria Mesqua, Constantine Anthony, Elizabeth Becerra,
Yes.
Gary Boyer,
Yes.
Drew Boyles,
Yes.
Art Brown,
Aye.
Wendy Bucknam,
Yes.
Margaret Clark,
Yes.
Jenny Crosswhite,
Yes.
Rick Dennison,
Oh, you got yourself off.
John Dumitru,
Yes.
Keith Ike,
Yes.
Margaret Finley,
Yes.
Claudia Frometa,
Yes.
John Gabbard,
Yes.
James Gaisley,
Aye.
Marshall Goodman,
Aye.
Kurt Hagman, Jan Harnick,
Yes.
Mark Henderson,
Yes.
Mike Judge,
Yes.
Joe Kalnick,
Aye.
Trish Kelly,
Yes.
Kathleen Kelly,
Yes.
Tammy Kim,
Yes.
Lauren Clayman,
Yes.
Linda Krupa,
Yes.
Carlos Leon.
Yes.
Just to confirm that was a yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Locke Dawson. Patricia Locke Dawson. Clint Lorimore,
Aye.
Ken Mann,
Ken Mann, yes.
Steve
Patricia
Manos.
Lock-Dawson is an
Yes.
aye, thanks.
Thank you. And Steve Manos, I noted that as a yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Ray, thank you. Ray Marquez,
Yes.
Andrew Maciel,
Yes.
Larry McCallan,
Yes.
Casey McKeon,
Yes.
Lauren Meister,
Yes.
Dennis Michael,
Yes.
Maria Nava Frolic,
Yes.
Frank, thank you. Frank Navarro,
Yes.
Oscar Ortiz,
Yes.
Luis Blancarte,
Yes.
Gail Rebollar,
Yes.
Rocky
Yes.
Rhodes,
Yes.
Deborah Robertson, Deborah Robertson,
Yes.
thank you. Celeste Rodriguez, Celeste Rodriguez, Ali Saleh,
Yes.
Suli Saro, Zach Schwank,
Yes.
David Shapiro,
Yes.
Marty Siminoff,
Yes.
Jose Luis Solache,
Yes.
Jose, thank you. Hilda Solis, Karen Spiegel, Steve Ty,
Yes.
Jeff Wood,
Yes.
Frank Yokoyama.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion for items 2 and the consent calendar passes with 52 votes yes, 0 votes no, and 0 abstentions.
Thank you all, and we'll now hear from Darren Chitsey.
And I do have a raised hand by Celeste Rodriguez.
Oh, just Celeste, yes, in case you didn't have it recorded.
Thank you so much.
Adele Andrade Sadler, Alhambra, yes.
Unfortunately, we cannot count your vote as you were not at a listed location. Thank you. 53 total for passing.
Thank you.
I just wanted to offer a quick thank you. Certainly, past President Lorimer's had to run, but was briefly joking with him. Perhaps we should name the green print after him, since so many of those discussions came under his tenure. And he reminded me to actually started a president before him. So this is 4 years going now that we've had this critical item up for discussion amongst this body, and really appreciate the work, not just of the subcommittee that started off, that Clint led us to, but also to the TAC, and particularly the stakeholders that engaged and provided their thoughts and their time and their resources. But none of that could have happened without the amazing team that we had on staff, led by Ryan and Kim and India, and all the countless hours over the last several years of finding the right path forward. And a tool that we think will provide a lot of value to the region and great benefits moving forward. So congratulations to all of you, and thank you, and really appreciate the Regional Council's leadership here today.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If those still stand, a roll call, please.
We've finished the roll call,
We
Mr.
did?
President. We're ready to move on to item 10.
Damn, how did I miss that? I was sitting right here. I got carried away with it being passed.
exciting.
So go to the transit panel now. Item 10 of them. Well, I'll ask Darren Chitsey to kick it off for us.
All right.
Well, the rest of us
Well,
relocate.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. If I could ask the panelists to come forward, and I'll start discussing. We're going to ask the officers to move to the front row as we get going.
I was gonna say the stairs were killer.
Yeah.
I think suppose if I did, that was an easy ask.
Well, that was quick. Thank you very much. Well, I'm honored to welcome some very esteemed guests here today. When President Brown took over his presidency, we had the opportunity to discuss with him what he wanted to focus on. And certainly being president of the Regional Council in a year that we're working on our Connect SoCal document and plan is a very critical one. But there were a couple issues on top of the broader long-range transportation discussion and sustainable communities discussion that the plan really sparks, that Art wanted to make sure were present under his tenure. It was about how do we work on clean vehicle technology, that transition that is not just about electrification of the fleet, but broadly around clean vehicles that we're able to have last month. Today is about transit, the future of transit, the current state of transit, and the critical nature that plays in our broader transportation system. And next month, we'll bring to you a group of speakers to talk about goods movement and trade and the important impact that has on our system as a whole. So I'm proud to introduce a panel today that will touch on a lot of interesting issues that are going on with transit today. I'm going to introduce each of the panelists, provide them an opportunity to do some opening comments. We'll get into some light discussions, but certainly want to save a lot of time so that members can ask the panelists questions as well and have a good dialogue. So first and foremost, we'll start with David. David Aguirre is Executive Director of the Imperial County Transportation Commission. David, welcome.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you, members of the Regional Council. As Darren noted, my name is David Aguirre. I'm the Executive Director at the Imperial County Transportation Commission. Our agency is represented by our 7 cities within the Imperial County, in addition to the County of Imperial and the Imperial Irrigation District. At ICTC, we wear a number of different hats. We are the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. We're the County Transportation Commission. We're also the Public Transit Agency provider. In addition to, we also administer the Imperial Valley Resource Management Agency as well. So we wear a number of different hats, provide a number of different duties for the residents of the Imperial County. As it pertains to public transit services, we have a number of different types of services that we provide. We are a rural county, so none of our services are particularly large, but we do provide a number of different services. We provide fixed route, ADA paratransit services. We have intra-city dial-a-rides, non-emergency medical transportation, in addition to a newly installed service of microtransit in the city of Calexico. With that said, I think we transport somewhere in the ballpark of about 100,000 people a month. We do receive quite a bit of an influx of passengers coming from Mexico because we do share a border with Mexico. I want to say that's probably all I want to know. If there's any questions, of course, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thanks, David. Appreciate you being here, and we'll have some questions for
Thank
you shortly. Absolutely. Darren Kettle, our next door neighbor downstairs, the CEO of Metrolink. Welcome, Darren.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. And good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm Darren Kettle, Chief Executive Officer at Metrolink. I arguably had the shortest commute to get to this meeting today. We are 2 floors below you on the 15th floor of this building. Now, that was the short part for me to get here. I'm a lifelong Southern Californian. I live in Camarillo, California, in Ventura County, and some of my former bosses actually sit around this table, and Mike Judge and Jenny Crosswhite. I'm a regular user of our train. I get on at the Camarillo station 3 days a week usually, and make the trip from Camarillo to Los Angeles, 3 or 4 subway stops to here. So as the saying goes, I'm not only am I the Chief Executive Officer, I'm also a customer. Again, lifelong Southern Californian, grew up in the Inland Empire. I worked for SCAG in the mid-90s, and I took this relatively new startup railroad in the mid-90s to get to our offices here at 7th and 5th, catty corner from this building. So I was a user of Metrolink as a commuter, and what would be considered the old school commuter. 4 or 5 days a week, buy my monthly pass, took the train like clockwork, everything was smooth. Of course, what's happened in the last 3 or 4 years is our world has completely changed, and the notion of what the classic commuter is very, very different than what it was in the mid-90s, or even I'd say March 1st of 2020, when we pretty much a couple days later all went home for 3 years. And that has fundamentally changed our system. We used to get about 40,000 daily boardings at Metrolink prior to the pandemic. Right now, with some service adjustments that we've made in the last year, along with some different fare products and some different programs to try to encourage ridership, we're at about 20,000 daily boardings. So a 50% reduction in where our ridership had been. And I can't say that should be much of a surprise given what we all know is the case. I mentioned that, again, I live in Camarillo and I love the job I have, but I do work 2 days a week remotely from home. That is the world we live in today. And if we don't change our business model to reflect that we can't be just about commuters, which is what our history has been for 30 years, we aren't going to be sustainable. So a number of my board members here, I feel like I'm actually at one of my board meetings, considering I have my chair and Larry McCallan, and we have Ray Marquez, and we have other members. And we are talking about that very conversation about moving away from being this commuter railroad to a regional passenger railroad serving all of Southern California, and not just about commute trips. We're a 545-mile system, 6 counties, 67 stations. We're the 3rd largest regional passenger rail system in the country. And we have massive potential that we haven't realized yet. I hope over the course of the next several years and some new ideas that we're putting out over the course of the next year, we can really capitalize and become Southern California's true regional passenger railroad and not just be about the commuter. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. And Michael Pimentel, the Executive Director of the California Transit Association. Thanks for coming down, Michael.
Yeah, happy to be here. And folks, again, I'm Michael Pimentel, Executive Director of the California Transit Association. I want to give you first a bit of background on who we are as an organization. So we are the statewide nonprofit trade organization that represents California's transit industry. Our charter is broad. It includes member education on topics of importance to California transit agencies, but our bread and butter work is actually advocacy. And the work that we do every day is making sure that our transit systems, our rail systems, have the funding resources they need to continue to deliver service, to build major capital projects, but then also to make sure that they have the statutory and regulatory support to be able to provide enhanced services to our communities. Our membership includes 220 member organizations. That is transit and rail agencies, ferry operators, parts and manufacturers that provide to California transit agencies, but also RTPAs and MPOs like SCAG. And in fact, as I look around, every person around my table is a member of the California Transit Association. And the work that we've been doing over the past few years has really been focused on pandemic response and recovery. Now, at the height of the pandemic, which coincidentally aligned with my ascension to the role of executive director, we ended up doing a lot of work to provide funding directly to the agencies. We were the tip of the spear for the state in requesting federal emergency relief for the California transit agencies. That ultimately delivered $10 billion in support over 3 relief packages that has kept agencies afloat. Last year, we also then led the advocacy efforts at the state level to make sure that there were resources that were being provided by the state to deal with what we saw as a pending and really looming fiscal cliff for agencies statewide. That advocacy effort ultimately delivered $5.1 billion in added resources for the agencies, monies that can be used for capital projects and for operations, and that in most cases will keep agencies operating at least fiscal year 22 service levels for the next few years. Now, as we had made that push on funding at, again, the federal and state level, we're always clear internally and with outside stakeholders that that funding needed to be a bridge to long-term reforms, long-term support for agencies in being able to provide services that would welcome riders back and lead us to a position of fiscal solvency and operational viability over the mid to long term. And the way that we've been addressing that is by slowly chipping away at state mechanisms, and I should say furthering state mechanisms that provide agencies with, again, the statutory and regulatory support they need to be successful. And much of the work that we've been doing has been focused around 4 main themes: improving the speed and reliability of transit service, expediting transit project delivery, expanding access to our transit services, and addressing rider safety. And these are the things that we know our riders want. You do basic surveys, whether they're rider surveys or statewide or national surveys, and what you find is that folks want fast, efficient, effective, and affordable public transit above all. And so our work has been moving toward bringing those statutory mechanisms into place. I've got a list of things I can speak to, and certainly as we go into conversation, I want to unpack some of the work that we've done more fully. But I would just note in brief form that a lot of the work that we have done has been around transit prioritization. We'll get into a bit more of that in a moment. And then also providing relief to agencies with regards to environmental regulations and permitting to make sure that they can deliver these projects in fast and efficient manners. And so I want to return the balance of my time, and then we can get into some conversation in just a moment.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. And Selena Reynolds is the Chief Innovation Officer at LA Metro. I know you had a busy schedule today, so appreciate you coming over, Selena.
Yeah, it's really nice to be with you, and I appreciate the invitation. It's always great to address COME and Darren's assemblies and councils, because it's a real opportunity for me to understand more broadly what's going on in the region. So I learn a lot when I have opportunities to be before you, and really appreciate the window of time. So my name is Selena Reynolds. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for LA Metro. Prior to being at LA Metro, I was the General Manager of the Los Angeles Department of Transportation for about 8 years. LADOT has the largest municipal transit service in LA County in Dash and Commuter Express. And, but that is small potatoes compared to, what LA Metro does. That's like saying, well, we're Fanta and we're the largest auxiliary soda in the marketplace when, Metro is really, Coke. So it's been really exciting for me to transition over to LA Metro. And one of the things under my purview, and I think the reason why COME reached out to invite me here, is preparation for major events, including the World Cup in 2026, and a small event that the counties and the region are hosting in 2028 in the Olympic and Paralympic Games. So I'm going to talk just briefly about some of the things that Metro is focusing on to return ridership, but certainly happy to unpack a lot of the preparations and thinking around how we are going to host the world in 2028. So I think LA Metro, and under Stephanie Wiggins' leadership, has really been focused on three main things to try and return ridership following the pandemic: safety, reliability, and cleanliness, and service overall. So in terms of safety, Stephanie launched the largest transit ambassador program in the country to really provide a cadre of people whose job it is to be a friendly face, eyes and ears on the system, riding the system, present and available in almost every station, on almost every line, both rail and bus, to really provide a reassurance to people that there's somebody there who's looking out for them. That has sort of gone hand in hand with an expansion of the Transit Security Officer program, and LA Metro's board is currently considering whether or not to bring the formal law enforcement services to an in-house force. So that is a conversation that's ongoing, but in the meantime, really looking for ways to provide that overall sense of safety and security, which is about really the presence of other humans that are empowered and in charge and able to address and de-escalate situations when they arise. The second, in terms of cleanliness, has really been about devoted teams at some of the, particularly the rail stations, where both the observed and reported issues were the greatest, and having a team that's actually there, janitorial services there physically on site, really on all the time that service is offered. But it also includes creating some security presence around the ancillary areas. So at all the stations, the emergency exits have to remain open for emergency use. But what that means is that people can get into the ancillary areas where the people, the maintenance workers, the mechanics, really the back end of the transit service does its work. And there was a lot of issues with those ancillary areas that were spilling out into the stations. And so addressing those directly was a really key part of the overall sort of cleanliness approach. And then really taking a different approach to service. So restoring all of the revenue hours of bus service, eliminating the transit operator shortages that we were experiencing that were leading to very high numbers of canceled routes and canceled service. Reducing the headways for along the rail lines, taking them down from 10 minutes to 8 minutes, from 15 minutes to 12 minutes, from 12 minutes to 10 minutes, and continuing to iterate and adjust. And we're seeing really positive results. So ridership on Metro's overall system on Sundays is back to 96% of pre-pandemic levels. On Saturdays, it's back to about 88% of pre-pandemic levels. And overall, it's back to about 75% of pre-pandemic levels. And some of that happens because we get a boost when, for example, something like the Eras Tour comes to LA County, and the Swifties get on transit, and it's our job to make sure they have a good experience, because word of mouth is really the most powerful thing we have to bring people back onto the system. But the other thing I'll say is that one of the projects we have in the Office of Innovation is something called Mobility Wallet, which is a part of a larger pilot called Universal Basic Mobility, where we are focused in some of the parts of the region where people are struggling the most in terms of their access to opportunity, and also where they fall in the overall sort of levels of poverty. And it has three components. It includes redesigning streets to have bus-only lanes and protected bike lanes and things of that nature. Provision of services, so providing electric vehicle car sharing or electric bike libraries where people can access a car when they need it, or can use a bike when they need it. But it also includes direct aid. So Mobility Wallet is $150 a month that goes to folks for their use on any form of transportation other than a single occupant vehicle. So they can use it for Uber, Lyft, taxis, Greyhound buses, Amtrak, whatever they would like. And through our partnership with universities that are doing some research on the effectiveness, what we're seeing are really tremendous returns on that investment. The overall number of trips being taken by a majority is still on public transit, but the money being spent is on all of those services that many of us may take for granted that fill in the gaps, either by time of day or by a particular route, where we don't have that service to really provide an overall improvement in people's quality of life. So I'll stop there, and then we can get into the games and talk a little bit more about that in the conversation.
Sounds good. Thank you, Salita. And you touched on my first question, but maybe ask the others to expand on it as well. We certainly know and understand, post-COVID ridership is down across the region, maybe about 20%, maybe as high as 50% for Metrolink. Transit plays such an important role in our regional transportation system. And while a lot of the riders today are transit dependent and don't have as many options, and that's a critical part of the transportation system that we need to provide for to grow ridership, to get those optional riders back on. There are a lot of different agencies in Southern California. SCAG is 191 cities and 6 counties itself, and I think there's about, Michael alluded to it earlier, all of us are members of his organization. So what kind of coordination needs to happen, should happen, is happening between all of those different agencies, so that, as Salita referenced, is happening with all the different private transportation options in parts of LA County, that folks that are traveling from point A to point B can understand the options available to them and how the different systems, both public and private, are working together. I don't know if Darren, you want to start?
I'll go ahead and give it a start. One of the things I can share is at Metrolink, we have agreements with nearly all transit operators in Southern California where there's a free transfer. Most everybody's going to be familiar with the fact that we have that with LA Metro, because many of us do that. When you take a train in, you get into Union Station and you're taking a subway or a bus. But that also goes to Dash and a number of other transit services, as well as local neighborhood services. I think the biggest challenge, Darren, that we have, of course, is getting that word out. It's one of those best kept secrets, and we don't want it to be a secret. And so we want to continue to push that ability that people can use that last mile, first mile. The name of the RTP is Connect SoCal. And who does that better than Metrolink? I mean, that it almost could be our name. But then you have to get to that last mile or that first mile. And that's the challenge I think we all have. And you don't get accustomed to doing that until you've tried it. And so now our job is to try to make sure people know they can do it. So they do try it and actually experience it, because once they do, they can see how well it works for them.
Thanks, Darren. Salita, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just I'm not as smooth as Darren is with the button. So I'll just say I think it comes down to really two things, and that's trip planning and payments. Most folks, I don't know how many the road to hell is paved with transit trip planning apps that were well intentioned, but launched boutique in a, agency by agency manner, right? Because for a while that was the hot thing. Like, you get an app and you get an app and you get an app. And then you'd put all this effort into it, and lo and behold, you'd look and you see the downloads, and they're abysmal, because the way people do their trip planning is on Google, or those other native apps that are already in their phones, right? So how can we shift gears to provide that white label service? And there was a lot of conversation earlier about data, right? This is really where the opportunity is for us to provide data in a way that can be used by those apps really easily, but that aligns with our goals and priorities. That's a tricky thing in working with another sort of big tech provider is that their goal is to return value to shareholders. Their goal is not to shift people from single occupant vehicles to other modes of transportation, right? So when you pull up your Google app and you look at the travel time, driving is almost always the fastest, but it doesn't take into account the amount of time you have to spend looking for parking, finding parking, how much parking will cost, and then, your sort of last mile to get from the parking garage to wherever you're going. But transit does pay that penalty on that app, right? And the payment itself is not embedded there. It's not easy to just say, great, I'm going to take Metrolink to, Metro, and I'm going to get where I'm going. And I can book and pay for my ticket right there in the app. And then I can just use my phone the same way I pay for a cup of coffee to get on any of those transit services. So I think those are key challenges that are really user experience challenges. And I know Metrolink is doing some amazing work in this arena. Metro is doing some work as well. But back in the early 2000s, transit agencies were on the cutting edge, right? Everybody was providing those special cards, little plastic cards, tap card, clipper card, Oyster card, whatever they're called, wherever you are. And it was like this amazing leap forward, right? Well, now we've been leapfrogged, and those sort of single-use pieces of plastic that you carry around and have to load at specific places, that's not the way people live their lives anymore. And so creating that and that new way of using things and simplifying that, I think, is our biggest challenge that requires a tremendous amount of integration and coordination in ways that we haven't necessarily done it in the past.
Thank you, David. Michael, you want to add?
Yeah, and I'm gonna agree with both statements. I think there's definitely opportunity for us to be able to have conversations in terms of what we're doing to collectively in terms of technology, and looking at ways to integrate that technology so that the user can not only use software or whatever it might be in Imperial County, but they can use it here with Metrolink, and they can use it wherever else they might be going. So if there were a mechanism in place to be able to do something like that, I think there's definitely obviously some significant positives for everybody to be able to have that experience and use phone applications to be able to conduct payments. We're a little different from, the technology would certainly help in general, but since we receive so much cross-border traffic, cash is always going to be a significant component to how we operate. And there's really no way of eliminating that. But for folks that are younger or maybe more tech savvy, they can use phones, and just being able to integrate that with other locations would be helpful for everyone, I think, just moving forward.
I'm also happy to jump in and just provide a perspective from more of a policy front, given that we don't typically weigh in on operational or governance matters here at regional or local levels. But one of the areas where we have been pretty involved is in shaping funding guidelines for various state funding programs. For example, the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program every year provides upwards of $1 billion for projects at agencies across the state. And within those guidelines, which are really directed toward building major capital projects, we've worked with the state to identify what could be scoring preference for agencies that build into their applications an acknowledgement and movement toward integration between systems, integration of open loop fare payment systems that would be using your Visa card, using your MasterCard that's already in your pocket to enter a system, and trying to find ways to offer encouragement to agencies to think through how they can collaborate with their regional partners to advance more seamless services. I would also note that many of our members have been participating in the state's California Integrated Travel Project at the California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, whereby the state is providing support to many small and medium-sized agencies in updating the real-time travel information. It's a standard called GTFS, making sure that information is accurate and produced on things like your Apple Maps or your Google Maps platform. And also, they're providing agencies who are interested with outfitting their transit buses or rail cars with transponders that are brought to bear through master services agreements overseen by the state, and that again allow you to use the MasterCard or Visa card that's already in your pocket to access transit services. And part of the reason why we see these types of technologies as being advantageous, and here I want to note from a technology or provider perspective, we as an association are agnostic, whether it's CalITP or some agencies will go with major providers like Cubic, is that we see the ability to use open loop fare payment systems as really lowering the barrier to entry for our systems. Oftentimes, folks may not have the change in their pocket to pay the dollar fare. They may not have the fare media in their pocket to ride that bus that they already see coming, but many do have a Visa card or MasterCard in their pocket that allows them to enter those services. So we've taken more of that approach of encouragement toward these types of systems and trying to find ways to provide, again, incentives for these agencies to adopt these technologies. And I'm sure we can go into a bit more as the conversation goes on.
Thank you. Last question from me, and then we'll turn it over to the regional council. So the state has certainly recognized the need to have a serious conversation about the future of transit and has formed the Transit Transformation Task Force that I know many of you serve on. SCAG, represented by Come's on that group. It's planning on meeting over the next couple of years and put a report together. Obviously, funding is a critical issue for the future of transit. So talk a little bit maybe about what's the #1 funding priority that you're looking for each of your agencies. And additionally, what's the main hope for a policy change that perhaps comes out of this task force to help move the state?
Well, Salita said it. I have a quick trigger finger with the microphone. Well, first of all, I think the good news is we're having this conversation today, but we also have SB 125 that gives us this time to have the conversation. If we didn't have SB 125, and certainly Michael Pimentel's group at the California Transit Association was tip of the spear on that, led it. So did Metrolink, because we've all been dealing with some level or another of the fiscal cliff. And in my agency, the difference of a fiscal cliff is that we can't run a budget deficit. I just can't run as much service as our customers are asking for. And so we have this period of time. SB 125 gives us this period where resources are coming to county agencies. Hopefully, some of that will sprinkle over to Metrolink. That's what I'm hoping. Wink, 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 wink. We need to see those resources to help us transition from this commuter rail model to a regional passenger rail model where we're running trains throughout the day, into the evening, and on weekends. That's really what our vision is. And our board just heard quite a bit about this in a board workshop last week. I think that though now we have the task force whose job it's going to be is like, hold on, if California's goals are, let's do what we can to reduce BMT, let's do what we can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, let's provide access to affordable housing in areas that are further distanced from, in many cases, employment centers, then the state needs to step up with providing resources. The policy conversation is the policy conversation, but that is not going to be what funds the services of LA Metro, of Metrolink, ICTC services. It's going to be a question of if the state is prepared to put out policy goals that hit those high points, then the state needs to be prepared to step up and resource it adequately. We've done this in the short term with SB 125. Great job. Now we need to see that continue in my book so that we can do what we want. Our riders are demanding more service. We've heard it loud and clear. We're only going to do that if we have resources to be able to make it happen.
Well said. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, so I think for the association's perspective, the dominant focus is going to be receiving flexible operations funds for agencies to scale up their services. I think one of the things that has been a bit challenging in our conversations in Sacramento is that so much of the focus has been on where are transit ridership levels relative to the pre-pandemic levels. And it's a valid question, but the follow-on question that legislators and any form of elected official should be asking is also, what level of pre-pandemic service levels are we running? And the reality is that while many agencies are at between 65 and about 85% of pre-pandemic service levels, many of them are also operating, or I should say ridership levels, they're operating service levels that are also commensurate with that. We have a problem where we're not able to actually scale up the services to meet demand. We've got to get to a position of being able to do that. At the same time, this is a bit of a departure from the conversation on operations. We have a workforce challenge. where agencies, even if they have the resources today, may not actually have the ability to put the service out on the street because they don't have operators to operate their buses or the rail cars. And so part of the conversation that we're looking forward to having with the state as we enter those task force conversations is how do we take a macro approach to solving the issues that are currently facing public transit. Part of it is operations, part of it is workforce, and a lot of the workforce challenges come down to safety challenges, particularly for our operators where they're experiencing higher levels of assault and battery. That makes it difficult to recruit and makes it difficult to retain. And unfortunately, in the landscape that we found ourselves in over the past few years, the legislature has been averse to taking any form of new approach to addressing those types of incidences as they occur on our systems. We're hoping that this year, and we'll be introducing a bill on this effect to try to combat operator assault and battery, recognizing one, it's a moral thing to do. But then two, when it comes down to service levels, we're not going to be able to actually provide better service, get those ridership levels up if we don't have the operators be able to operate our services. So those are going to be some central focuses for us. Many more, but I'll want to turn it back.
Thank you. Salita?
I'll add a couple things. I think I agree with everything that Darren and Michael said in terms of flexible operating dollars. That's all really critical. I think it's also critical for the state to look at unfunded mandates with a keener eye, given the impending fiscal cliff that many agencies are facing. I'll just dive in for a couple minutes on one of them, which I think we can all agree is the right and virtuous thing to do, which is fleet electrification. Right? There is a mandate. We have a mandate. We got to get there by 2040. The Metro Board has endorsed a 2030 goal. However, we learned just this week that El Dorado, which is one of the last ones standing, a manufacturer of electric buses, is leaving the market. That leaves one manufacturer in the entire United States of America that is Buy America compliant that can produce electric buses on the scale needed to help all of these transit agencies transition their fleets. There's also Gillig, which is a great company as well. They focus on small to medium-sized orders. So we know that we don't have the manufacturing capability. The base is completely unstable. We know that those vehicles are still a lot more expensive than purchasing CNG vehicles. And we also know that when you look at all of the things that actually will get us to where we want to go with our climate goals, getting more people to ride public transit, bike or walk, is really the main one that we have to focus on. Well, where does that put us if we have to cannibalize operations dollars to pay for a more expensive fleet, not to mention the upgrades in the facilities and the fueling infrastructure necessary? It means that we are cutting off our nose to spite our face. You know, we're reducing service, which could then reduce ridership, which then we know is counterproductive to the climate goals that we have, right? And these things are all important. They must all proceed, but there needs to be a more nuanced discussion about mandates like that and how they fit together and what the relationship is among all of our climate strategies, given the funding shortfalls that we see. I think LA Metro has a unique tension as well, in that it has a voter mandated list of capital projects that are increasing in cost. You know, on an annual basis, and looking at that Measure M list of projects and watching those costs go up, and then being confronted with the operating dollars as one of the sources to make up those funding shortfalls, just creates a really vicious cycle where we're ending up in a place where I think none of us want to be. But the last thing I'll say, and this is just the Metro Board is going to have a budget workshop on March 29th. So this is not the board speaking, and this is not Stephanie speaking. This is Salita speaking. But I do think that one of the other valuable things to come out of a task force would be to widen the definition of what public transit is to serve the varied needs of this entire state. We have to have trunk line service, MetroLink, Metro, Bus Rapid Transit, et cetera. But we also have to get realistic about the kinds of services that fill in the gaps. in a state that is still, catching up in terms of its land use density. So things like electric vehicle car sharing, things like bike sharing, other forms of transit, micro transit, shuttles, et cetera, that we can look to help really grow the overall transit ridership in the state, and give people the options that they really need. I will just also say a last point for all of us to consider is making sure that Southern California gets adequate and due representation on these task forces, and also, bodies like the CTC. We know that we have a great governor. We also know that governor came from Northern California. I also worked a long time in Northern California. I love Northern California, but we have to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure that Southern California's needs are being appropriately represented in these forums.
Thank you, and well said. Questions in the room? I know, Larry, would you have your hand up or put it down? Okay. Yeah. Maggie, is there anyone online that has a question for the panel?
There's a raised hand from the city of Mission Viejo.
Hi, this is Lucy Dunn. I'm the business rep for the SCAG Regional Council, and honored to be so. And nice to see my friend Darren Kettle from all my years in transportation. And I also served on the California Transportation Commission for both under Governor Schwarzenegger and Governor Brown. So these are not new issues. And they're long-term challenges for the state, and there's no question about it. Two things that I just wanted to share. The first point is Salida speaks to my heart when she talks safety, transit is homeless shelters, transit security, and cleanliness. I was just a speaker for a congregation, Temple Shur HaMalat in Irvine, and with 75 congregants in attendance on a transportation forum, we asked them, why don't you ride transit? And all four of those issues came up with these people. So I would encourage not just Salida to say that, but all of you on the panel to include those talking points right up front as challenges for why people aren't using the system. That's number one. And I know this is a harebrained note. I totally get it. Isn't there any way, because high-speed rail is taking so frickin' long, isn't there any way we can get some high-speed rail money into this system, which would be used by more people? So my 2 points, one more, sorry, one more, last point is our presidential priorities. In our packet today, our agenda packet today, list a number of things for SCAG to work on. I would respectfully ask our president to include Salida's comments on safety, homelessness, security, and cleanliness as part of the things that SCAG also takes a look at in order to make transit more viable for our Southern California population. Thank you, panelists. Any thoughts?
I'm
Go ahead.
happy to jump in. And on the safety and transit security front, thank you, Lucy, for elevating that specific issue on public transit. I'll highlight some of the ways that we've been working to address it at a statewide level. So over the past few years, we've been working in partnership with a group of advocacy organizations, largely based out of the Bay Area, who've been furthering the call within the state capitol on the need for us to address particularly the safety of women, people of color, and folks from the LGBTQIA community as they ride our public transit systems. Frankly, folks, we know that they experience higher and disproportionate levels of harassment, assault, verbal and physical, as they're riding our public transit systems. They've worked very closely with agencies in the Bay Area, primarily BART and SF Muni. Also, there are analogs here in Southern California with LA Metro to build out campaigns and to build out investments to be able to curb the incidences of assault on our riders. And one of the things that we're finding is that as they move forward with those campaigns, we actually do see ridership levels increase. We also see the comfortability of our riders go up as they're being surveyed on our systems. The way that we've been supportive of that at the state level is to support legislation working hand in hand with those advocacy organizations to move 2 bills through the state legislature, both of which were signed by Governor Newsom, the second of which actually has funding attached to it. And it will provide agencies with some resources to enhance surveying of those incidences as they're experienced on their systems and to begin to lay the foundation for improvements to their services to address precisely these issues. The other thing that we've been working on is homelessness on public transit. For the last 3 fiscal years, we've been asking for the state of California to provide transit agencies with direct access to homelessness funding. And for those 3 fiscal years, we've been denied that request. Much of the funding, as you all know, goes to the counties, and that's appropriate because you all oversee human services. But we do have agencies in this state that are multi-jurisdictional across different county lines. We also have special districts that provide transit services. They may not have access to direct funding because if you're a multi-county agency, everyone's problem become nobody's problem. You don't get the resources you need. If you're a special district, you have no chance outside of coordinating with your counties to get resources. And so one of the things that we were happy to support, and this I need to give a shout out to LA Metro because they actually led on this front, was to move legislation forward that would compel that as counties are directing their resources toward homelessness, that there's at least some interaction with the transit agencies to understand what are your needs, how can we provide resources to you, and to stop short of requiring that funding be provided, but to at least hear the agencies out. Because we understand that this is foundational to getting riders back. I can't speak to any survey data that's been conducted here in Southern California, Bay Area through the Bay Area Council has done a lot of survey work on this front. And as much as work from home is a chief impediment to growing ridership in that region, this is listed as the second highest reason for not growing ridership in that region. So we do need to make some progress on this front. Lucy, thanks for raising it. And I'll just say it's going to be central for us moving forward in all conversations. It's co-equal with operations funding, co-equal with addressing unfunded mandates as being things we have to do if we're going to give public transit a fighting chance in this state.
Thank you. And was there one more question, Dennis, on the line? Dennis Michael?
Yes. My question is I'm just curious, as we all know, probably most of us all know anyway, certainly we do in Rancho Cucamonga, that Brightline West will be having a high-speed rail from Las Vegas to Southern California, the Cucamonga station, which is at the Metrolink line in Rancho Cucamonga that stop. Is there some dialogue that's going on between the private company Brightline West and Metrolink and other transit providers to talk about the increase of ridership, frequency of trains, and then a seamless transfer? If I wanted to leave from Union Station and I wanted to go to Las Vegas, if I buy a ticket, can I make that work to where it goes all the way through and I don't have to sit and wait and purchase another ticket to get onto the other line? Just curious.
So thank you, Mayor Michael. First of all, it's nice to see the mayor of my hometown. I grew up in Rancho Cucamonga. My parents and family are still there. And I think there's a huge amount of enthusiasm at Metrolink for Brightline West coming to Southern California. We've already started. We have an MOU with Brightline West. I regularly meet with their president out of Las Vegas. We're looking at integrated ticketing. We have already started working on schedules that will allow half-hour frequencies on the Metrolink line, on the San Bernardino line, all the way through to Rancho Cucamonga, and actually as far as San Bernardino by the time Brightline West comes online in 2028. The idea being that our Metrolink tracks will be on a ground level, and then you will be able to go up one flight of stairs or an escalator to Brightline West's lobby and jump on the high-speed train there. We frankly see it as this tremendous opportunity that is, we haven't had a chance to talk about the Olympics because it is a game changer. But when you start looking at Brightline West from a Metrolink perspective, the ridership that is going to be generated with our service because of Brightline West, the potential is just through the roof. We will fill our 5 and 6 car trains on the San Bernardino line with half-hour service throughout the day in both directions. That is what the ridership projections are for Brightline West. And I would even go so far as to say, you're not going to be able just to buy your train ticket at LA Union Station. I'm going to be able to buy my train ticket to a Brightline West train from Camarillo. I'm going to take a train through LA Union Station, get on the San Bernardino line and connect to the Cucamonga station. That is what's envisioned for how we're going to make Metrolink and Brightline be seamless in Southern California.
And it won't be just Las Vegas to Southern California, but it'll also be the high desert at the two stations in the high desert that will be commuting back and forth from work potentially and hopefully, instead of being on the 15 freeway and clogging that terrible corridor.
Absolutely correct. We're looking to embrace those new commuters to our system.
Thank you so much. I appreciate definitely you've been right on top of things, sir, and I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Last question, Past President Harnick, did you have a comment?
Thank you. First of all, whenever I'm from the Coachella Valley, so I drive to San Bernardino Depot. And when I buy that ticket for Metrolink and Metroline, I feel like I'm buying time. I'm adding hours to my life. So I appreciate it greatly. But I heard something that was alluded to a couple of times. You talk about unfunded mandate and our goals for environment and all these things we're trying to achieve, and they're all great. But I can't help feel that we have policy blur, because we start talking about the electrification and people think if they buy an electric car, it's all good. But an electric car takes up the same space as a car that is propelled by a combustion engine. So I can't help but think that if we address Sacramento and ask for some strategic, clear communication, accurate communication that helps people understand this isn't just about electrification. It's about efficient land use. It's about protecting our environment, et cetera. Because I think we are missing that. People buy an electric car, they think it's all good. So it's so much bigger than that. So I wonder where we can get a coordinated effort for strategic and accurate communication about where we're trying to go with this.
I think that's what one of the roles SCAG can frankly play. Not to put it back on you, but I think that is something that's super important. Those are all things that we do need to talk about. And again, SCAG is a convener and a facilitator of those conversations. I think there's opportunity in this room. And I think your Connect SoCal plan is a tremendous vehicle for being able to make that happen. As you said, I've been in this job 2 years and 4 months. I've yet to drive my car to the office here. I've only taken the train, unless I have to go someplace else afterwards. Otherwise, I do that because I get hours back in my life. And so I think it's a matter of embracing that. There's a certain amount of it. And, telling that story, I think, is a big part of it. And certainly SCAG can help us do that.
Then we have to drown out Sacramento yelling about electrification, and we have to tell the bigger story.
Well, and there was, several reports that came out from the AQMD and other air quality management districts that it's very clear that even if we do achieve all of our electrification hopes and dreams, we won't get where we want to be on climate, the preservation of the things we value most in our natural environment, unless people drive less, to the tune of about 25% less, right? And I think our challenge is, how do we help people see the benefits, the clear benefits to them, instead of it feeling like an attack on their way of life, right? Measure M is a great example that people in this county were willing to go to the ballot box and vote to tax themselves in perpetuity to build out, a real 21st century transit and transportation system. But when you knock on the door and say, okay, it's time for that bus rapid transit lane down the street from your house, it's a completely different conversation. And I think that's where we still haven't quite cracked it. How do we get people to really feel and see the tangible benefits to making very small shifts in behavior, but the necessary changes in infrastructure that have to accompany that. And I would love it if we were able to, as a region, come together and come up with some clear messaging on that was compelling to people.
Agree. And I think we're ripe for a real regional campaign about transit and encouragement. And I think certainly maybe statewide, or if not, I think all of us coming together, I think could really make a lot of progress. Michael?
The only thing I was going to add is I think there's going to be tremendous value in the years ahead of regions and local electeds speaking to their legislators, speaking to the governor's administration, including the California Resources Board, on the need for us to rebalance this conversation toward mode shift and less on electrification. I want to be clear, our association has a position of support for CARB's various regulations, and we arrived at those positions after extended multi-year negotiations with CARB on all of the regulations that impact our industry. But we've always acknowledged that the dollars that are best spent are going to be spent on operations that encourage folks to ride our systems and not on this zero emission transition. And I say that in the years ahead, the engagement from the regions and the local electeds is going to be critical, because I think we are coming at that point where we are going to have to request some more affirmative relief from the regulations. We don't have an official position on that at this time, but I do think that we are at a bit of a breaking point where agencies are facing this fiscal cliff, as Salita mentioned. They're going to have to make decisions in these coming years between funding capital, zero emission transition, and operations. And we cannot allow for the conversation to only be focused on battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell bus at the cost of service. And to be candid, in bringing those types of positions to the administration, to the legislature, we're seen as any other regulated entity who's asking for relief. I think we have a different narrative to tell. I think we have a more compelling and science-based set of observations and analysis that we can bring to bear, but it is going to require more than just the industry voice leveling that request of the state. It's going to have to be all parties who recognize the importance of focusing on mode shift as we make continue, but perhaps more gradual progress on the zero emission front.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. But before we end, just one quick thought from each of you. There's been so many of the challenges have been discussed here today, and we certainly all agree the critical role that transit plays for our economy, for our safety, for our climate. But what gives you optimism about the future of transit? David, you want to start us off?
I think, we share a common space, right? So we're not alone in our goals that we're essentially trying to achieve. So just knowing that we have that space, we have a voice collectively to be able to pursue what we need to pursue and solve some of the issues that we're all encountering, I think just gives us hope. Plus, all of the efforts that we put into just even recently with SB 125, that was a large effort collectively that we undertook to be able to establish that funding that we needed essentially to help us stave off the fiscal cliff for now. But it really does show, again, the power that we have collectively to be able to achieve what we need to achieve. So I'm confident in our ability collectively to be able to make a change when we need to make a change.
Darren?
It's an easy one. The next generation. The next generation is what gives me optimism. We launched a program in October, the Student Adventure Pass, utilizing a grant, LC Top grant, where anybody can ride our train, any college student or high school student can ride our trains for free anywhere in our system. You sign up through the app, you can go anywhere. We've immediately seen a response to that. On my train ride home, there's some kids that get on at Cal State LA on the San Bernardino line, make the transfer at LA Union Station, jump on the Ventura County line, and make stops at Burbank, Van Nuys, and Northridge. You want to have a good time? Get on a train ride, passenger train with a whole bunch of high school seniors and junior college or college freshmen, and just observe. And they're excited about it. They love it. And I think that is our future. What gives me optimism is those young people, they haven't figured out that they're only going to drive a car for the rest of their lives, like most of us. They're actually saying, I'm going to take the train, and I'm really excited about the fact that they're willing to do it. And it's a lot of fun just to sit back and observe.
Great, Michael.
What gives me optimism, I think, is the breadth, the scope of this new state transit transformation task force. Try to be as brief as possible, but When that task force was initially conceptualized and we were working with the legislature on establishing its charter, they wanted to have a focused conversation on what's wrong with public transit. They meant what is wrong with public transit agencies. And we offered a counter to that, which was to say we need to have a much broader conversation around land use policy, housing, workforce policies that have made our systems underwhelming. And so we are going to be engaged in these conversations over the next 2 years and carrying that message that we have to have a 360-degree view and analysis of what is ailing public transit today. It can't be a narrow focus of public transit issues. This isn't an engineering problem, it's a social problem. And I think over the coming years, if we're able to have that task force and steer it in the right direction, what we can drive is policy is really thinking concretely, comprehensively in a systems way about how we make public transit better. And I'm hoping we can do that at a high level. Of course, conversations are ongoing in disparate ways, but never in a coordinated fashion. I think we're getting there.
And Salida, last word.
Yeah, I'll just say, at least here in LA County, we're actually experiencing a renaissance of the build out of transit infrastructure, both in terms of opening new rail lines and also sort of a huge boom in the build out of transit only lanes on street, right? We started out before the pandemic with a very small number. Now we're up to over 50 miles with ambitions to get to another 100 miles before the Olympic Games. And I think the Games offer us an unprecedented hard deadline for all of us to row towards in implementing some of these legacy projects. The Games in Rio, which was really, Rio moved people just with really bus only lanes and BRT, and they sustained a 20% mode shift after the Games were done. So a huge opportunity to give people a great experience using multiple forms of transit. And I think an opportunity for us to come together as a region around that.
Well, thank you very much. Please, a round of applause, both virtually and in the room for our panelists. Thank you all for being here today. And I turn it back over to President Brown to take us home.
Oh. Okay. Now receive reports from the business representative, myself, and the executive director. Before we get in, we have any members of the public wish to speak on those three items?
No raised hand, Mr. President.
Okay, Lucy Dunn, a business report.
In the interest of time, Mr. President, I'll forego the report other than to just share one breaking news item, and that is that co-plaintiffs, U.S. Chamber, California Chamber, American Farm Bureau, and our own BizFed LA just filed a lawsuit against the California Air Resources Board, challenging the state's so-called climate accountability package, which would require companies to disclose direct and indirect emissions to CARB, upstream and downstream partners through their supply chains. They are contending it's a breach of privacy and an impossible vendor reporting requirement for them. So stay tuned on that. I have some more information on housing, but we're at the witching hour, and so I'll hold off for my next report. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to welcome Regional Council Member returning Ashley Aitken, OCTA representative, Mayor of Anaheim. Call for board officers. SCAG is now accepting applications for the 2024-25 SCAG officers positions. Application forms are due by 5 p.m. Thursday, February 15th. The clerk emailed instructions on January 16th on how to apply. Please let us know if you didn't receive them so we can resend them to you. After review of applications, the nomination committee will forward its recommendation to the Regional Council for consideration at its April 4th meeting. The slate of SCAG officers elected by Regional Council will be presented at the General Assembly meeting scheduled for May 2nd at the JW Marriott Hotel in Desert Springs Resort and Spa, Palm Desert. I recently appointed a number of members of several committees. Thank you all for your service in these groups. Appearing on the screen now is the members of the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee. This committee reviews changes to our current bylaws. The next are names and members for the nominating committee, which review candidates for officer positions for the regional council. And lastly, the scholarship committee. I've appointed the following members of shown on the screen. This committee evaluates applications for the SCAG scholarship program. Okay. On January 19th, I led a SCAG delegation on a tour of the Long Beach, and special thanks to Vice Mayor Cindy Allen and Councilman Marisaro for hosting in their city. SCAG members Marshall Goodman, Frank Yokoyama, Margaret Clark, Dan Kalnick also joined the tour. We learned about the state of goods movement as we toured the Alameda Corridor, which is the nation's largest trade gateway. We also toured award-winning affordable housing projects that will benefit low-income seniors, formerly unhoused veterans, and thanks to our guides to the Long Beach Housing Community Development Department. I look forward to our next tour in San Bernardino County with ISRA and Metrolink. The Inland Empire Economic Partnership recently recognized SCAG with a 2023 Public Agency Award. Executive Director Komi Asiji accepted the award at the Inland Empire Economic Partnership 2023 Annual Dinner and Awards Reception earlier this month. Chief Operating Officer Darren Chitsey, Regional Council members Karen Spiegel, and Policy Committers Thomas Wong and Aquanetta Warren were also in attendance to celebrate this recognition. Please note that there will not be individual policy committees in March. Instead, we will hold a joint meeting of the policy committees. And a special thanks to Mayor Deborah Robertson, who invited me to a dinner held by the California Black Chamber of Commerce for California Transportation Secretary Taco Sharian, who is a great supporter of hydrogen fuel and bicycles. Our next meeting of the Regional Council is scheduled for Thursday, March 7th, my birthday. Don't forget that, at 12 p.m. I'll call on Executive Director, COO Darren Chitsey for his report.
Thank you. In the interest of time, we'll email out COME's executive director's report to all, but just a reminder, the Joint Policy Committee meeting that is scheduled for Art's birthday. Of course, it's scheduled for Art's birthday. Absolutely. Will really be to hear comments back on Connect SoCal. It'll be an opportunity to hear what we've heard from the community, what we've heard from stakeholders, staff to respond, update, and for the Joint Policy Committee to act and send that to the Regional Council for their consideration in April. So it should be a very exciting, informative meeting, and we hope to see you there, not just to celebrate art, but to celebrate Connect SoCal as well. Mayor?
Any future agenda?
I think Mayor has an announcement.
Mayor Luck Dawson.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to announce that next week, February 8th, the City of Riverside and the City of Rialto are hosting a joint public-private partnership, or P3, workshop with AIAI. They are a national nonprofit organization that certifies folks who would like to enter into P3 agreements, either on the city side or the private sector side. So we'll be bringing together representatives from cities as well as private investors and builders and developers to hear how to create effective public-private partnerships and deliver exciting, interesting projects to their cities. And I believe Yvette Macias is going to send something out to the SCAG membership. So if you would like to attend, please just contact Yvette and she'll get you the information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Nope. Oh, I hate to say this, but thanks for your participation. This meeting is now adjourned.